Well, welcome to the latest exploration of our collection here at the very Reverend William McMillan Library here in First Dunmurry, non-subscribing Presbyterian Church. Now, you might remember that recently we had a look at the two wonderful Rowel Friers cartoons that we have in the library. And you might remember that these were commissioned for a special exhibition that the Reverend Mac organised in the McCleary Hall in 1975, or the start of 1976, to celebrate the 250th anniversary of the Presbytery of Antrim. So that was 50 years ago. So we've now actually reached the year of the 300th anniversary of the Presbytery of Antrim. But back in the start of 1976, the Reverend Mac organised a really impressive exhibition in the hall here. And these two Rowel Friers cartoons were commissioned to go in the exhibition. But what I didn't mention in the last video was that there were, in fact, three Rowel Friers cartoons. Now, one of them, unfortunately, has been lost for the last 50 years. But recently, as we have been continuing to catalogue the library, particularly all the ephemera, all the small printed pieces, the photographs and so on, Sue found this photograph. And it is, I'm sure, a picture of the missing third Rowel Friers cartoon. So this picture tells us another story about the history of Presbyterianism in Ireland. And it is a very fascinating story indeed. So this is the photograph of the picture. And as you can see, it's not exactly a perfect photograph because it cuts off the top of the heads of a couple of the figures. But we can see most of the detail, and we can see that it is four clergymen wearing 17th century dress. And that's a clue because this isn't actually the Presbytery of Antrim. This is the Antrim meeting, which was, I suppose, a sort of predecessor of the Presbytery of Antrim. And this takes us back to 1626. And this was one of the events that the exhibition was also marking. In the non-subscribing Presbyterian magazine at the time, the Reverend Mac writes, "The first of these historical landmarks was the setting up of the Antrim Monthly Meeting of Ministers. This Antrim meeting began in 1626 on the initiative of the Reverend John Ridge, the Vicar of Antrim, and its immediate objective was to moderate the emotional excesses of a local revival which took place in the countryside adjoining the 6 Mile Water, a river which takes its rise above Larne, flows past Ballynour, Ballyclare and Templepatrick, and enters Lough Neagh near Antrim." And we can connect this event with the cartoon by Rowel Friers through some of the other writings in the non-subscribing Presbyterian magazine at the time. So the Reverend W.J. Wharton writes, "In 1626, four ministers, the Reverend John Ridge, the Reverend Robert Blair, the Reverend James Hamilton, and the Reverend Robert Cunningham, formed what was called the Antrim meeting. In 1690, at the first General Synod of the Church, it was recognised as a constituent presbytery. This was illustrated in a striking cartoon which showed the four clergymen earnestly debating, while outside the window a rabble-rouser excites the population." And there's lots of interesting detail here. We can see the little mouse sitting on the floor looking up at the four ministers, and next to him are three large books, each entitled Understanding the Bible. And the Reverend John Radcliffe, the minister of Downpatrick and then the clerk of the General Synod, says some more in a speech at the occasion of the exhibition, which was recorded. He says, "At the other extreme there is another sort of Christianity, Corybantic Christianity. There is a cartoon on the wall there, a drawing of 4 rather austere clerics, and the date is 1626. Outside you see somebody rousing a rabble, not unheard of in these days. The 4 rather serious-looking clerics are trying to bring a bit of reason into it all. And the man outside is an exponent of Corybantic Christianity, the Christianity that is the direct opposite of that I have been describing tonight, and appeals all the time to the emotions in which people get carried away, and leads in the end to a very dangerous, in fact terrible fanaticism, the very negation of the Christian spirit." Now we know it's the Antrim meeting because of something that the Reverend Alec Elliott Peaston said. He was present at the exhibition, and it must have been a wonderful exhibition. And there was a dinner afterwards, and there was lots of speeches by all sorts of different dignitaries. But one speech is described in the non-subscribing Presbyterian as an impromptu address given by the Reverend A.E. Peaston. Now, Mr. Peaston was a considerable scholar in his own right, and on some future occasion we will look at his contribution to this library, because we have his books and his papers. But this is what he said about the exhibition and about this now lost picture by Rowel Friers. "First of all, I would like to say how admirable is this exhibition. It is a work of artistry and distinction, and anyone who is aware of the work of the Reverend William McMillan will know who is the craftsman. I doubt very much whether he is the painter or the designer, but he has actually made the outlay of this exhibition of extraordinary interest." And he lists some of the items in the exhibition. And then he says, "There was also a picture of 4 clergymen who allegedly founded the Antrim meeting. And all I can say is this: if the artist has made anything like an original copy of them, you and I are far handsomer, and what is more, far nicer men than they." And certainly if you look at the features, they are quite an odd looking collection of characters. But this is the 3rd picture by Rowel Friers, and one which takes us back to 1626 and the Antrim meeting, what is really the beginnings of Presbyterianism in Ireland. And Mr. Peaston concludes his impromptu address by saying, "I think that everyone will agree that this is a very interesting exhibition in every way. And as a minister of the Presbytery of Bangor, may I perhaps convey to the Presbytery of Antrim our greetings and our congratulations." So that's one exhibition I would have loved to have seen, although it was only in place for about a week 50 years ago. And in many ways, our library continues that tradition, and what a great legacy it is that tells us so much about the history and the tradition and the ethos of our denomination.